All right. So once again, welcome and thanks for joining us. First thing, just some housekeeping. If you haven't used Zoom before, thanks for hopping on. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And there's not too many people on here, so I may unmute you at some point, but keep yourselves muted for the moment. And Tehri, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. I am Taylor Jones. I'm the Endangered Species Advocate for Wild Earth Guardians. Wild Earth Guardians is a regional nonprofit that works to protect and restore the wildlife, wild places, wild rivers, and health of the American West. We've got over 300,000 members and supporters nationwide. We have offices in Santa Fe, Denver, Missoula, Portland, Seattle, and Tucson. And our work extends from communities to the courtroom as we strive to stop extinction and curb the climate crisis. And we've been doing that for over 30 years. Tehri, do you want to go ahead and introduce Rocky Mountain Wild?
Sure.
Yourself?
Yeah. Hey, thanks again, everybody, for being here today. My name is Tehri Parker. I am Executive Director at Rocky Mountain Wild. And we are a Denver-based nonprofit that works to protect biodiversity here in Colorado, southern Utah. We work a little bit into Wyoming and New Mexico. It's called the Southern Rockies Ecoregion. And some of the things that we do is we put together citizen science projects to help us understand how our species are doing here in Colorado. We also conduct a lot of science. You'll find us in the courtroom working to protect habitat. And then we also have a GIS department that does a lot of mapping because, well, if you don't know where things are, you can't really protect them. So we're always out there doing projects and do a lot of work to help other nonprofits by mapping different habitats and environments for them as well.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit first about a couple of projects that Rocky Mountain Wild has going on in the I-70 corridor and on the Front Range. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of Guardians projects. And hopefully these are both things that you will be inspired to get involved in one way or another from your home. So let me stop sharing my screen. Tehri, do you want to tell us about the wildlife crossing work that Rocky Mountain Wild is doing in Colorado right now?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's see if I can share my screen here. All right, are you guys seeing my PowerPoint? Or not yet?
Yet. If worst comes to worst, I have it, but I think I have the old version.
It says, Taylor says, host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh dear, okay, give me 1 second. Let me make you a host. All right, you should be able to do it now.
Awesome.
My apologies. Technology is always an adventure. There we go.
All right. You probably have too many windows open, but you know how that goes. All righty. So the project I want to talk to you guys about today is called the Vail Pass Wildlife Byway. And what it is a project that works to reconnect habitat across I-70 on the east side of Vail Pass. And as you guys are probably aware, when it comes to protecting animals and biodiversity, habitat fragmentation is like one of the biggest threats. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing this extinction crisis. And so we are working to put this habitat across I-70 back together so that our animals can move north and south across the spine of the continent while we continue to move east and west on I-70. And so the project is basically 3 wildlife crossing structures And these structures have been identified in a variety of different scientific reports, but most recently, a group called Summit County Safe Passages, which includes Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the U.S. Forest Service, Summit County, a bunch of different nonprofits have all come together and have said that this is a priority for Summit County. And so we're really excited about this project and making it go forward because it has a real broad base of support. So this is the map of the area. And if you can follow my pointer, this is I-70 that runs through the mountains there. This is Copper Mountain Ski Area. And up here would be the top of Vail Pass. And when you get just past Copper Mountain, the road splits. So these are the westbound lanes over here, and these are the eastbound lanes going the other direction. So why this area is so important to wildlife is that on the north side of the highway, basically you have wilderness. It's the Eagle's Nest Wilderness. It's completely unfragmented habitat. There's no development except for some recreation in that area. And then on the south side of the road, you have more Forest Service land that's actually managed for habitat connectivity. And that flows all the way into yet another wilderness area. So it's this broad swath of undeveloped land that we have this opportunity to put back together. And one of the things that's really exciting about it is that on the eastbound lanes where you see these blue stars, there are existing span bridges or elevated sections of the highway. So when you drive, you notice you're not on the ground anymore. And there's drainages that go under those. Well, the wildlife is already using those drainages to get under I-70 and out into the big median where that there's that nice rec bike trail that runs through here. So wildlife is currently moving basically through the eastbound lanes safely, but then they get into the median and they can't get over the westbound lanes. And that's where this project comes into play. So what we're proposing is 2 underpasses and 1 overpass, but it could be an underpass too, depending upon how the engineering comes along. And I just want to give you a quick idea of sort of what those look like. And I'm going to run through these slides pretty quick. But basically, there's 3 alternatives for the underpasses. One is basically a culvert, an arched culvert. One is a typical kind of span bridge. And the other is called a buried bridge. And these bridges actually have a layer of soil and dirt on top, so that it helps with the freezing issue that you get on top of bridges. And this gives you a nice idea, if you're an animal trying to get under there, what your visuals are for those 3 types of structures, right? The buried bridge has a little bit less space underneath it because it's got extra weight. And then, so in this location, milepost 193, these are what these structures would basically look like on the ground. So here's that culvert. Here's what a typical span bridge would look like. And there's the buried bridge. And this is all based on drone footage that we've flown over the area and then the engineering specs to see what they would look like. In the next location, same 3 alternatives, just a different view of how an animal might approach these and what they would look like for our wildlife trying to get underneath the road and connect these 2 drainages. And then the last location, 192.3, also has these same 3 alternatives. There's the culvert, there's a span bridge, and there's the buried bridge. But because of the landscape here, there's a possibility of actually putting in a wildlife overpass, which is really an exciting project for us because it'd be the highest wildlife overpass in the United States, I think actually in the world. And it offers a lot of good educational opportunities for us because it's so much more visible than a bridge. So there's 2 designs for that, sort of a more traditional design and then this hourglass design. And in these, again, the wildlife passes over the road while we head underneath it. So for the last 5 years, we've been at this site right here where this wildlife bridge is proposed, collecting data about who's there and who would be using those crossing structures. And we have a series of wildlife cameras up there, and just a few photos of who's there. So we know there's deer, we know there's elk, but there's also a lot of black bear. We actually had one summer where the black bears continuously knocked down our wildlife cameras. So we got all these shots of noses kind of hitting the wildlife cameras, which was really fun. We've seen mountain lion up there. This is a really big one. And then I think probably most exciting is that this is home to Canada lynx. It's one of the dispersed populations of Canada lynx when they were reintroduced. It's pretty hard to get a photo of them on a wildlife camera, so we were pretty excited about this one. And it's not the only lynx up there. There's been radio collared lynx, and we know that they're crossing the roads right where we're trying to put these structures. So yeah, so that's pretty much the project as it stands. We just finished, or we are finishing this summer, the initial engineering designs that'll narrow it down from those 3 structures in each location that you saw to a preferred structure for each location. And then we'll be able to move forward with specific engineering and cost estimates. And once we get to that point, we're basically considered a shovel-ready project, which means we can hopefully start to leverage federal funding and other transportation dollars to make these projects go forward.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tehri. And on the same note, in terms of what you're doing out on roads, it's hard to get outside these days, but you all have created a really innovative way to learn about wildlife from your cars. Can you tell us about your audio tour of I-70?
Sure. So last year, actually the year before, we put together an audio tour that you can listen to as you drive I-70. Basically, the woman in this photo is our biologist, Paige Singer. And I had traveled the corridor with Paige in the car with me. And I learned so much from her as we were driving about what was happening outside the car as we were moving. And that I had this concept of what would happen if you could drive. Why shouldn't everybody be able to drive I-70 with a biologist in their car? And that's where the project came from. We partnered with Stefan Brackett from the Flobots, who's one of our co-hosts in the audio tour. And it's really well done. There's a song, each segment of the stories or of the tour has a song from a Colorado-based band. So we've got original music, there's poetry, and then there's interviews with scientists. And basically it's a free program. You go to wildI70.org, the download instructions are there. It runs off a platform called Easy Travel, IZI.travel. And it's all pinged by GPS points. So once you start the app, you can just set your phone down, and when you come to the next area of the tour, that segment will start automatically because it's tracking you as you're driving. So you can listen to it hands-free. There's a lot of corny dad humor in it. Makes it great for the family. Makes driving I-70 go real quickly. And just this fall, we added a new segment on Arapahoe Basin. And if you didn't notice or know, A Basin is actually open for spring season for skiing today. So if you head up that direction, you can take the tour and listen to the new segment on A Basin. You'll be probably one of the first, because right after, kind of closely after we launched it, everything shut down. So.
Awesome. That sounds like a really fun way to explore I-70. Before we move on, I have one question for you, Tehri. Mimsy is wondering, once you get funding for the wildlife crossings, how long will construction take?
Well, it'll depend a little bit on the engineering of them, but there's been some really innovative things that have been done um, to speed up construction of wildlife crossings. And so actually, Taylor, there's a video that I can share with folks. I'll get you the link for it. Maybe we can put it in the comments. But basically, it's a time lapse of them building a wildlife crossing structure, and they move stuff in already. The arch is sort of like already done, and so they can just slam it together in a real quick period of time. So I think you're going to be looking at construction work that takes in different formats, probably over a year, but we won't know until the final structures are designed.
Great, thank you. So let me share my screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 Front Range projects that Guardians has going on. Does anyone else have any questions for Tehri about those 2 projects before I start screen sharing? Seeing no comments and no raised hands, I will go ahead. Oh, there is one. Are overpasses scheduled for other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a list around the state of other crossings that are just as important as these. We need these everywhere, and so there is a prioritized list. But as you guys can probably understand, CDOT doesn't have a lot of funding right now. Budgets are going to be really tight in the next few years. So it's kind of a slowed down process on that. But we do, if you've traveled out on State Highway 9 between Silverthorne and Kremling, you might have seen the overpasses out there. And they're just fabulous. They've reduced vehicle collisions with wildlife out there by over 85%. So they do work. And I see Deborah's comment that 67 has a lot of deer and elk collisions, and I can look at that list and see if that's one of the areas that is prioritized for crossing structures.
Great, thanks, Tehri. So one species that's very dear to the hearts of many Guardians on the Front Range is the prairie dog. And prairie dogs are a keystone species of the grasslands. Many other species, including burrowing owls, eagles, black-footed ferrets, etc., depend on them for food and habitat. But they're often managed as pests. So one of the things that Guardians is working on right now is we have, in concert with the Prairie Dog Coalition and the Humane Society of the United States, we've created a guidance document for communities that want to put together humane prairie dog management plans for their communities. This is it's meant to be used by cities, towns, municipalities, potentially even counties if you get up to that level. And this is in order to preserve prairie dogs where they are and prevent conflict before it starts. So the management plan the guidance document is found on our website at the link that I dropped preemptively in the chat. And this is something that we're looking for input and help on from communities across the Front Range. So if you know of anyone who is interested in creating humane prairie dog management plans, or communities who currently do not have management plans at all, which is a big problem in the Front Range and the source of a lot of the conflict that comes up between prairie dogs and humans, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or with Wild Earth Guardians, and I will drop my email in the chat right now. This is a living document. This is something that we're rolling out currently, and we are trying to get input and test out how efficacious it is for communities and volunteers and people who care about prairie dogs and want to see them managed in a better way. So let me drop my email. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of in these times is meetings moving to virtual spaces that weren't previously accessible to a lot of people. So one other thing that we're trying to do is engage more with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. Since their meetings have moved online. And for those of you who may not know, the commission is appointed by the governor, and it's a body that's responsible for many of the decision-making processes that happen at Parks and Wildlife. And they frequently hear from groups like hunters, fishers, and trappers, but they also need to hear from non-consumptive user groups as well. You can learn about their upcoming agendas on their website, and I'd encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to attend a meeting digitally to see how meetings are made. The next virtual meeting is going to be June 11th and 12th. And I've also dropped the link to that meeting in the chat. And if you're a Colorado resident, I highly recommend getting involved with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. It's something that not a lot of wildlife advocates know about, and we could use more wildlife advocates coming into those meetings and making their voices heard. So with that, are there any last questions?
Hey, Taylor, I see that our biologist Paige has joined the meeting. I just want to make sure that I didn't say something that she wants to correct.
Great.
So maybe if we can unmute Paige and just let her say hi and let her correct anything that I may have gotten incorrect.
Sure, Paige, you are unmuted.
Hi everyone, this is Paige Singer. I'm a biologist at Rocky Mountain Wild, and I've been working up on Vail Pass, trying to I'm part of the Summit County Safe Passages and trying to get the structures built up there and doing the monitoring with Denver Zoo. Tehri, I don't have anything to correct. You did a good job.
Thank you, Paige. Awesome.
Great.
Hey Taylor, I have a question about the prairie dog work. Is there, other than making plans with your community, are there other ways that people can get involved in protecting prairie dogs?
Yeah, so the Prairie Dog Coalition has several habitat restoration projects happening now. So there's ways to get involved with on-the-ground restoration. I was just out in the field yesterday pulling invasive weeds. So if you are the sort of person who enjoys physical labor in the outdoors, you can contact Prairie Dog Coalition and offer to volunteer for some of those projects. They are going to be happening over the summer. They are going to be relocation projects and habitat restoration projects. So that's one way to get involved. Let me think of other ways. I think that's the main thing right now. Like I said, we're trying to get more communities involved in creating humane management plans. So getting involved in your local city council, letting them know that you are a constituent and you care about prairie dogs, that's always helpful. It's not a priority issue for a lot of municipalities and governments. So we want to elevate prairie dog profiles a little bit and educate people a little bit more about why they are important.
Yeah, there's There's some rulemaking that's going on right now with oil and gas, with the Commission on Oil and Gas, and we're involved in that. We're looking at primarily we're doing some work with bald eagles and protecting bald eagle habitat from oil and gas development. But as you guys probably know, bald eagles eat prairie dogs, so it all kind of fits together.
Yeah, that's a great point. The is it the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission?
Yes, yes.
And is there a place where people can give input onto those decision-making processes?
They are, you have to have standing to get into the next, to get into the hearings that are going to be coming up, but there are some coalitions that could really use your help, specifically funding help. And so let me just shoot my email out there as well. And people can, if they're interested in that, they can email me directly and I can put you in touch with the right people. But that rulemaking process is, it's bureaucratic and it takes a lot of time. People are putting hundreds of hours into it. So having financial help to help support that right now is really important.
Great. Thank you. I'm getting a question. Are hunters and trappers supposed to steer clear of the under and overpass areas?
Ideally, yes. These are meant for wildlife and as primarily as wildlife crossings. If you start to have too much human traffic on them, then they're not as effective. However, there is some research that's being done on whether or not you can co-use some specific types of wildlife crossings, but these are meant to be for wildlife only.
Great. All right, well, hopefully this has given you all some ideas about different ways to learn about wildlife and advocate for wildlife in Colorado. And unless there are any more questions, we can wrap it up and let you get back to your lunch. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.